Hong Kong, a great international metropolis, a haven for shopping and food, and an exciting, inspiring city of vigor. This is where the Orient and the West meet to join one another in a treasure trove where Chinese roots are still deep. Hong Kong is generally seen as a splendid metropolis where her marvelous and charming natural scenes are rarely noticed. Hong Kong lies at the estuary of the Pearl River. It faces the South China Sea to the south, and to the north, it borders the Shenzhen Special Economic Zone of Guangdong Province. Hong Kong is in a typical island sea environment and covers over 1,100 square kilometers of land, including the new territories and Kolong Peninsula that borders Shenzhen. Over 200 islands of all sizes scattered like pearls on the surrounding sea. The landscape here is rough with many steep slopes. Nearly 45% of the land is well over 100 meters above the sea. Hong Kong is in the subtropical trade wind belt. The land is always green and the flowers can be appreciated in all seasons. The summer rains here are so frequent that they will sometimes bring disastrous landslides. However, in the recent 2 or 3 decades, the government's efforts concerning this have become quite successful. In such a splendid, modern, urban area where you can hardly imagine that there could have been any industrial mining. Ma On Shan iron mine is the most important relic in the history of Hong Kong since British colonization. Mining operations in Ma On Shan started in the early 20th century and reached its height in the 1960s and 70s. In March 1973, mining operations stopped and the mine was completely abandoned. However, due to massive mining operations over the years, abandoned open mines, removal platforms, underground pits, waste dumps, and traces of the countryside can be found everywhere as a reminder of the history of the rise and fall of this mine. The gifts from nature are far greater than the mere several million tons of iron ore. Hong Kong herself is the most wonderful gift from nature. On this tiny island you can see so many marvelous geological scenes created with incredible natural technique. After billions of years, evidence of every geological change can still be found far and wide in Hong Kong to this day. These are precious inheritances and are the dearest treasures gifted to this land by great nature. Geographically, the Tolo Channel represents a typical geological fault in Hong Kong. Like a sword, it pierces southwestward into the east of the new territories. It is this sword that cuts out the geological history of Hong Kong and creates the most extraordinary scenes. The emergence of sedimentary rock above the sea level is rarely noticed. However, in Hong Kong, a myriad of these rocks formed over one another in 4 or 5 different ages and rose above the sea, forming straight lines along the Tolo Canal. This is a unique geological phenomenon. In point of fact, the Tolo Canal is a viable witness to eons of geological changes in Hong Kong. In the middle of the Tolo Channel, emerging above the sea level, are the oldest rocks in Hong Kong, which formed 400 million years ago in the Devonian of the Paleozoic period. These sandstones made of gravel and conglomerates were formed ages ago in the joint river estuary and seashore. Flowing water took them all the way from the upstream highlands and piled them one on top of the other, and they finally became solid rocks after years of compaction and dehydration. Eons of complex geological changes have caused many faulted folds and changed the horizontal attitude of stratum in the base of the sediment. The stratum here is now vertically steeped and even sometimes is upside down. Ma Shi Cho, which is in the Tolo Harbor at the southwest end of the Tolo Channel, is now a well-known natural coastal reserve here in Hong Kong. You can see sedimentary rocks emerge above the sea that were formed 260 million years ago in the Permian period of the Paleozoic. This was a warm, shallow sea teeming with a vast and varied number of marine creatures. These mudstones, siltstones, and sandstones have undergone drastic fold modifications during the eons of geological change and created the mesmerizing geological scenes that we see today. Found on the narrow sea strand of the North Bank in the Tolo Channel, this well-known ammonite hongkongus is a typical fossil of the Jurassic period. When the tide comes, this extremely narrow seabed of sedimentary rocks will be submerged by the floodwaters and ignored. But the geological history of the marine Jurassic period will never be simply submerged and ignored. Port Island lies at the northeast end of the Tolo Channel, covered by sedimentary rocks. This small island looks ablaze on the sea. These rocks took their forms some 80 to 100 million years ago in the later Cretaceous. Seasonal storm waters washed away sand and stones and then piled them on top of one another. Iron released in the harsh desert environment of extreme heat and drought stained these rocks scarlet like we see today. Weathering and erosion of waves in the following eons gradually shaped these scarlet rocks into an amazing and mesmerizing Dansha geomorphology on the sea. In the open waters of Mers Bay, at the northeast end of the Tolo Channel, lies a small island called Pingzhou. Covered by stratums of siltstone, mudstone, and chert layered on top of one another, this island stands in a stark contrast to the others in Hong Kong. These are the youngest rocks in Hong Kong, formed only 65 million years ago in the huge lake basin of the early Tertiary. These stratums are like a book with many pages that tells the infinite mystery of its geological history. The exchange of dry and rainy seasons led to the formation of these delicate, distinct stratums and is the basis for the study of the ancient climate and environment. The discovery of vast amounts of plant, sporopollen, and insect fossils in the stratum indicate this may have well been a warm and damp wetland with dense vegetation. Large areas in Hong Kong are also covered by igneous rocks formed in between the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods of the Mesozoic. Some 165 million years ago, in the late Jurassic period, the long brown magma eventually burst out with tremendous and disastrous violence. Mountains collapsed, heavy smoke engulfed the sky, and lava flows flooded the land. Debris, lava, and heated clouds of ash moved at extremely high speeds and swept over everything. This was an age that had witnessed the worst turmoil in Hong Kong's geological history. There is a stark contrast between rocks formed in different stages or positions of volcanic activity. Large debris fell near the crater and formed a agglomerate. And those that fell a little further from the crater formed pyroclastic breccia. Volcanic ashes floated in the air further still to fall and finally solidify into volcanic tuff. This layered distinct rock is called tuffite and was formed in the reservoirs of lower land by the fallen volcanic ashes. Nearby Lai Chi Chung, on the south bank of the Tolo Channel, is where the best full-grown tuffite can be observed and is a typical representation of the volcanic sediments found in Hong Kong. Full-grown sedimentary characteristics of all kinds and perfect post-tectonic deformations can be seen here. There is an ideal base for the study on tuffite and volcanic sediments. It can be hard to imagine these neat lines of marvelously huge hexagonal prismatic structures of stone are actually masterpieces of nature rather than man. These amazing prismatic structures of volcanic rocks were formed some 140 million years ago, when volcanic eruptions were as frequent as they were violent. In tremendous explosions, huge quantities of acidic lava burst out of the craters from deep within the earth. Molten rock immediately filled the lower land covering the slopes, and thus a very thick stratum of volcanic rock took its shape. When the molten rock gradually cooled down and solidified, simultaneous contractions caused regularly shaped fractures in the rock, and then formed something we call hexagonal prismatic joints. Great nature created a masterpiece, a rarely seen geological miracle. One of the most amazing gifts from this earth is the land we call Hong Kong. The agitation of the violent magma underneath ebbed away. Volcanoes calmed, and rock topography now started to be shaped by air and water into what it is today. Year after year, changes in climate and seasons, weathering and erosion, storms and tides went on, and constantly modified the landscape to be as splendid as we see in the area of Hong Kong. These patterned rocks, clearly standing out on the densely vegetated green slopes, are the well-known Hong Kong stone bushes. Huge rocks stand here to form a stone forest that looks as terrifying as it is mysterious. These stone bushes remind us just how great the power of erosion can be. Year after year, the miraculous work of weathering has shaped the stone cliffs that once towered in the sky down into a barren forest where only volcanic rocks are found. The inconsistencies of sea levels directly determine the rates of weathering. The sea level has risen and fallen for many times over the past 2 million years. The latest ice age appeared around 20 to 25,000 years ago, when the sea level was 130 meters below what it is today. Hong Kong, together with nearby islands, were once linked to what is now called the New Territory, with only several rivers separating them. Flows of water carried stones, sand, and mud into the riverbeds from high lands when the sea levels again raised the submerged river valleys into what became the beautiful bays and secluded islands of today. It may take millions of years for nature to change a landscape, but never that long for man. Our impacts on the earth can be seen in hundreds or dozens of years, and sometimes even sooner. In recent decades, many massive construction projects have been carried out, and these have drastically altered the landscape. Nature gives us all we have. What we need is a simplistic respect and wise handling of her resources on our only earth, so that we can live in harmony with nature to save her gifts for our future generations. And Hong Kong should take the lead.